All right, that worked out like a hole in the head. What's going on, OWS fam? The nation, my dudes and dudettes. Apparently, you can't start a video, follow-on video, when the countdown is playing, so I'll take that on board for the next time. In this week's edition of the Industry Experts session series, we'll call it. I'm still working through that. Bear with me. We bring in Papy, who is a contributing member at oneweekseason.com. Those who are over at OWS have probably seen his name popping up for the game write-ups, for some of the DFS stuff that we do. And we're going to start bringing him in a little bit heavier into the best ball streets. So without further ado, we'll bring him in. Mr. Papy, how are we today?
Hey, what's up, man? Excited. It's the start of the draft season this year, so everyone's got all the optimism in the world. It's like opening day for the Pirates. We're still rooting for them.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it isn't just swiftly that hype isn't swiftly swept under the rug like it is for the Pirates. I kid. I'm sorry. I had to throw that in there.
No, it's fair. We didn't even make it 1 month this year.
Yeah, dude. So I mentioned that we're going to be trying to fold you into the best ball streets a little bit more over at 1 week season through the Best Ball Plus product. Tell me about something that you have in the works for some written content for the Best Ball Plus subscribers, dude.
Yeah, so I'm excited to bring some best ball content this year, and hopefully for this year I'm going to be doing a piece that is kind of a riff on the famous chess book, Chess Master versus Chess Amateur. And for those of you that aren't familiar with my background, I'm a chess player in my youth in another life, and that book was very helpful to me when I read it. It's written by the only chess world champion who was not just a pure professional chess player, he was also a college professor, and so he was very good at explaining the way that people think and helping you improve. And what the book does is it shows you a chess master playing at first a very weak player and then all the way up into another chess master, and it illustrates mistakes in thinking at lower levels. And when you are at a higher level, when you're a master, you're playing a weaker player, you see something and you know that's a mistake. But the weaker player doesn't know it's a mistake. And oftentimes it's simply a mistake in thinking. And I think that in best ball, there's a lot of similarities to that, in my opinion. And I think that when I first started best ball in Best Ball Mania 2, I think I was, a weaker player. I did 100 lineups. I had a 5% advance rate. I learned from that, right? And then in Best Ball Mania 3, I was much more average in my advance rate, right? 16, 17%. And I also got a team through to the finals, performed much better. And then last year, Best Ball Mania 4, I had a 31% advance rate, got a team through to the finals again. And so I think that through those years, my thinking has changed and the way that I'm approaching it has changed. And I think that I can explain that difference in thinking of how I was thinking when I had a 5% advance rate, how I'm thinking now when I have a 30% advance rate, and really hopefully, let people think, hey, it's not necessarily just player selection, right? It's doing things the right way from a strategy standpoint and then hoping you get the players correct. And a lot of times now when I'm doing drafts, I see things that I know are not right. And again, I use right loosely because, right could be you draft the right player, but things that aren't optimal from a strategy standpoint. I see those things and I now recognize them. This is not optimal. And I think I can identify that's because of somebody's thinking and the way they're thinking right now. They can think at a higher level. And so I'm going to try to draw a comparison between those different ways of thinking between different levels and show everybody how you can kind of play like a master.
Let's go, dude. Play like a master. I like that. Draft like a master, y'all.
Draft like a master.
That's what we're here to do, dude. So I love that. That sounds awesome, dude. I'm looking forward to reading that myself. Again, that is going to be here probably in the next 7 to 10 days, open to OWS Best Ball Plus contributors. If you are not a member, there is a link in the description. Get signed up for Best Ball Plus through 1 week season. Also, let's throw this up on the board here. Sign up for drafters for new users using code OWS. Get 100% first deposit match up to $100. So that is effectively 5 free entries into the drafters tournament. I used that this year. I was not on drafters before this year because it was not available in Arizona until this year. So I'm over there in the drafters streets. It is plus EV. Always get that free money when you can. So check that out. We've been hammering a lot about, or talking a lot about over these first 2 weeks, over these first 10 sessions, for the Best Ball Plus product. We've been talking a lot about variance, because variance is one of the pillars that we need to understand. We need to have at least a working knowledge of, if not a mastery of, as we are playing this, as we are drafting in this draft cycle, because we get, why is that? We get more information as we continue in these. I mean, look at next. I mean, in 4 days, we're going to get the schedule release. So that is a slew of new information. We're going to have a reset kind of on the playing field as we draft these contests. A little bit less so on drafters where it's cumulative scoring, but most definitely, uh, you got a friend, bro.
Just ignore this large cat. Didn't know
That's
she was
so
coming.
good.
She was coming to visit today. Sorry, she. There you go. Sit down, girl.
What's her name?
Bastet. She's named after an Egyptian cat goddess, but she's a Maine Coon, so she's about a 20-some pound cat. She's
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a large cat, dude.
it's a large cat.
You're collecting mountain lions over there, dude. What's going on?
She's the girl. You should see her brother. He's even bigger. But
Oh, no kidding.
I don't get
That's
a
funny.
double appearance here because I'll just be swimming in cat.
So yeah, we're talking about variance. What are some things that you're seeing in this early portion of this draft cycle? And again, before we have schedule, before we have any depth chart breakouts, I mean, we have a few, but we don't have a lot of information, which makes variance the highest it can be right now. What are some situations? It can be a team player. It can be the way that you're putting together drafts. What are some ways that you're manipulating variance right now, dude?
Yeah, so I think that understanding variance is a really important concept because, some of the earlier mistakes that I've made were thinking that I knew more than I did. And I think that a really good way to kind of manipulate variance, particularly in the world of best ball drafting right now, is to look at backfields, because backfield to me is the most variance heavy spot on any team. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's because, number one, rookies can tend to come in and make the biggest impact in backfields right away. Number two, there's the most injuries in backfields. Number three, running backs' performance are largely a factor of their team and their scheme and their blocking. And so oftentimes whoever is just the one in the role matters more than the actual player himself. And so, there's a lot of variance in backfields, and we see this every year. Kyron Williams last year, right? McKinnon the year before that. There's just, there's always some random guy in a backfield that at the beginning of the year right now we're not really even thinking of, or isn't on many people's rosters, that radars, that ultimately wins leagues and wins people a lot of money. So that happens every year. So when you're thinking about who to draft right now, I did a lot of big board drafts this year. And for people that aren't familiar with the big board, that's the underdog contest where you draft before April's draft. So, you don't even know who's going to be on what team. And I have never done that before. But the strategy that I developed was kind of looking to get two established running backs that I knew were kind of starters somewhere. And then I just drafted all rookie running backs, just 4 or 5 rookie running backs. Like, every single one of my teams is basically 1 or 2 guys that are, the starters somewhere, and then all rookies. And so I was able to do that and only really use 2 picks on those running backs in the top 100, for the starters. And then most of the rookies you get after the top 100. So I'm, have good quarterbacks, tight ends, and wide receivers on all these teams. So in doing that, I was basically just saying, look, I have no clue. That's the ultimate peak of variance, right? Like, I don't even know where these guys are being drafted, but I'm just going to assume that a team drafting a running back probably at least has some running back need. And so when they go there, they're probably going to end up moving up in ADP when we're actually drafting them for Best Ball Mania. So why not just swing away on all of them now and say, like, okay, well, if I draft 4 of them, probably at least 2 of them are going to be the guys that go to desirable locations. And then, so what? The other ones will be backups or whatever. What's the difference in drafting that and a guy I know is going to be a backup? So I think that, looking at variance that way really helped me, because if you look at the running backs now and where they got drafted, many of them moved way up in ADP between, the big board drafts and now Best Ball Mania, like a guy like Kamani Vidal or Ray Davis or even Bucky Irving, who, went to Tampa, which could be a favorable situation. A lot of those guys moved way up, and I was drafting them in the big board basically for nothing, past pick 150 in most cases. And so I think that was a really good way to like attack variance. And even though the big board is done and now we have less of that that still exists, right? In Best Ball Mania, it's still the
Oh,
same
yeah.
thing. If I'm looking at like the Dolphins backfield, a guy who I didn't draft a lot of in the big board, and I haven't drafted at all yet in my 5 drafts I've started on Best Ball Mania, is Devin Ashane. And it's not because I don't love him as a player. In fact, last year I said he was my highest owned running back at like 44%. It's because he's being drafted like 20th overall. It was even like 18th or 19th overall earlier before
Yeah.
in the big board drafts. And I just didn't see that like in his, that's like a big workload, RB1, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley type players were going around there. And Ashane is in a crowded backfield even before Jalen Wright went there. And he's just not a very big dude. Like, yes, he can break big runs. And yes, he's going to score some 70-yard touchdowns on ESPN that everybody's going to see. But when you're talking about drafting a guy in the first 2 rounds that, might play 40% of the snaps and has a lot of injury risk, as we saw, he's just not a big guy and he gets hurt. I don't understand that. And I think that's misapplying variance a little bit there and just thinking, well, Shane had these huge games last year and he broke these huge runs this year. And so he's, worth 20th overall, instead of really understanding like Jalen Wright could outperform him this year. Like he could. It wouldn't be totally insane if Jalen Wright scores more fantasy points than Devin Ashane, especially if Devin Ashane gets hurt. So, I don't see that pick. That pick doesn't make sense to me at that part of the draft.
I think you just pissed a lot of people off, dude. And I love it. I love it. I don't know if I've seen or heard anybody, or I don't know if there's anybody in the industry that has the balls to say there is an outcome where Jalen Wright outscores Devon Achane.
Well, there is, and it's not even like that insane.
Yeah.
I mean, Achane is faster than him, but he's not even like that much faster. I mean, Jalen Wright still runs a 4.3, and he's a lot bigger. And again, one injury, it might not even require an injury. I know you could say that about anybody, right? Like, oh, well, if Jonathan Taylor gets hurt, then whatever, his backup. But it's like, it might not require an injury. It might just be that like he gets, I don't know, more, some similar amount of carries and he breaks more of the long runs than Achane does. Like it could just happen that way. Or maybe he doesn't outscore him in fantasy, but maybe he just gets close to him. And it's like, okay, well, one guy was pick 140 and the other guy's pick 20. So he has to literally like not matter by comparison for that draft difference to be correct. And I just don't see it.
The Dolphins are very interesting as a function of a team right now. I mean, we saw this team be hyper concentrated last season because it was like Mike McDaniel inherited a lot of those pieces when he came in. He inherited Mike Gesicki. He inherited his wide receiver 3 that was in flux all off season. Now they kind of handpicked who they got going for their depth chart this year. I mean, they just signed Odell Beckham Jr. They drafted Malik Washington. They drafted Jalen Wright. And this is now they drafted Devon Achane last season. This is now a team that has been handpicked. They brought in Jonnu Smith. So this is a team that has been handpicked by Mike McDaniel and current staff. You look up and down that roster, it is like they have speed for days. Like this is going to be very, very different. And a lot of the how they run their offense is probably going to be very similar, but it could be a situation where it's like, this is not just a 2-man deal through the air anymore. This is not just a 2-man deal through in the backfield anymore. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of variance on that team. Let's talk about the other side of that. Throw me a team where the players' values are depressed and you're seeing some opportunity for some value here in the early portion of the draft window.
Yeah, so I have one for you here. Like last year, I screamed from the rooftops to draft the Packers. Jordan Love, I had like 50%. And this year, that guy and that team is the Titans. And I think that's
Let's go. All rise. Let's go.
So you agree with me on the Titans? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Levis, he is not quite in my mind as certain of a thing as I felt about Jordan Love, who had sat for 3 years and people were really treating like he was a rookie and he just wasn't. But I do see a lot of similarities in that they're both very aggressive players. They're gunslingers. They're, Levis could easily have one of the deeper ADOTs in the league. And I think that was a trait I saw in Love last year that was similar. And he did end up having one of the deeper ADOTs in the league. And that's important for fantasy. And the other thing is the Titans' perception in our mind, I think, is just wrong because they've been this slog, Mike Vrabel, 1992, slam King Henry type team for I don't even know how long. I mean, Mike Vrabel was there a long time. He was like one of the longest tenured head coaches. And so, we just associate that with the Titans, and especially people that don't live and breathe this every day and really follow where all the coordinators go and that type of stuff. There's just a public association that the Titans are a running football team, and they're not going to be that this year. I mean, if you look at bringing in Callahan and what he did with the Bengals, and then if you look at just the way that they're changing their personnel, I mean, bringing in Ridley, they just signed Tyler Boyd. Believe me, I'm not a Treylon Burks apologist over here, but as far as a fourth receiver goes, I mean, the guy was a first round pick in 2022. He is, 225 pounds and runs pretty fast. He's, as far as a fourth guy to come in rotationally, he's pretty good as a fourth receiver, I would say. They got a Chig, who I'm not even going to try to say his last name, but he's a pretty athletic tight end there. And again, he can be had in drafts for nothing. And then you look at the quarterback. To me, he's, Levis is Jordan Love, esque in the sense that he's kind of being drafted in the exact same place, right around pick like 160. Even before he got Ridley, I was drafting him in the big board drafts even later, like pick 180 and 190, but still at 160, that's a huge discount. And, you can stack him with either of his running backs, his tight end for free. Hopkins and Ridley are a little bit pricier, but they're not, really high picks. So build in the Tyler Boyd is still available around pick, like 200, and Burks isn't even on anybody's radar. So you can, stack the Titans passing game and even get Spears or Pollard with it. Again, I think Spears is around pick 120, Pollard's around pick 90 to 100. Like none of them are really expensive. And that's why I think it feels like the Packers last year, where I'm basically stacking the Titans as backups, and that's how it was with Love. I mean, he was on like 50% of my teams, but he wasn't the starting quarterback on hardly any of them. And it's the same thing with Levis this year. Like he's my backup, so I can draft, an elite QB, like one of the top 5 QBs. And I think on my first 5 best ball mania teams, my starting QBs are like Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts. And then I have Levis as a backup on 3 of those. And so that's just like what I did with Love last year. I just had him as Titan stacks as a backup, throughout my teams. I think I'm going to do the exact same thing this year.
I love that, dude. Trivia: who led the league in intended air yards per pass attempts last year?
It might have been Love. Was it
Will
Love?
Levis?
Was it Levis? Yeah. See, there you go. It was Levis. Yeah.
10.4, dude.
Yeah.
That is deep. For comparison, 10.6. Second in the league was CJ Stroud at 9.0. So that is massive. And that was on 255 pass attempts, which is about half a season's worth of an average pass attempts in current league. So this is I'm with you, man. Will Levis, I'm through about 60 drafts across the best ball sphere, random contests or various contests. And Levis is and Tennessee Titans stacks are just so easy. So easy. Even if, DeAndre Hopkins is currently off the board as the wide receiver 56 on Underdog. What?
Yeah, not when I'm playing, but yeah.
What? And it's so easy. You can grab both Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins with we're talking like an 8th and a 10th rounder, 8th and 11th rounder. So it does not cost a lot. It is super easy to do. I do want to just not let this slide, dude. You mentioned the top 5 quarterbacks earlier, and Anthony Richardson wasn't in there. I don't support that. I'm just kidding.
I actually really like Anthony Richardson. In fact, in the big board, I have him at like 15%. He was a guy that I was targeting relatively early. I would put him literally just as the next one, right below that first group, and I could easily see him finishing within that first group of quarterbacks. I think he's a good value this year, and I do like him. I didn't mention him in that group, but I am on him.
I do want to real quickly talk about quarterback, and talk about what we're thinking about when we're drafting a quarterback. We're drafting a quarterback in the first 6-7 rounds. We're saying that quarterback has a shot at overall quarterback 1. That's just boiling it down to like the most simple thing that we can. We're saying like this quarterback has a shot of being the overall QB1. After that, when we start getting into the middle to late rounds, so like your rounds like 8 to 11, that kind of sweet spot, we're talking about Dak Prescott, Jordan Love, all the way to probably Jaden Daniels, probably all the way to Jaden Daniels there in Washington. Those quarterbacks are your take shots at spike week upside guys. So your Jaden Daniels with the rushing upside definitely has that. Dak Prescott, obviously, Dak is one of the most underrated quarterbacks right now from a fantasy perspective per ADP. So his upside, his range of outcomes profiles very well against his ADP currently. So there's a lot of upside there. I'm not famous. I will say controversially made a tweet earlier this week that was Dak Prescott probably has a better shot at overall quarterback 1 than Lamar Jackson does this year. What is your response to that? And then I'll give my reasoning.
Yeah, I'd say, I don't know that he has a better shot at it, but I think he might have a higher range of median outcomes than Lamar Jackson. I think if you say like who's going to be the QB1, I think Lamar Jackson in everything right for him season has QB1 upside, but I think in an everything wrong for him season has a lot of downside that Dak doesn't necessarily have. I am not a huge Lamar Jackson guy. I happen to have him on one of my first 5 Best Ball Mania teams because I stacked the Ravens and just worked out for that draft. But I'm not like targeting Lamar Jackson this year. And I think that it's mainly because, number one, I could see Derrick Henry taking a lot of the rushing touchdowns. And that's a big part of what he needs to thrive. And then the other part of it is I just don't know like how much they're going to let him keep running. I think they scaled it back a little bit last year. And again, the addition of Derrick Henry just makes me think they're trying to not have him take all the abuse. And he has to run to reach his top range of outcomes in fantasy. He's not going to get there just as a passer. And so if that offense becomes more Derrick Henry around the goal line, more play actions and trying to get him open looks to throw and just try to take some stress off Lamar Jackson having to run all the time, I think that's a huge ding to Lamar Jackson's fantasy value. And so while I don't mind him in stacks where I'm just stacking Ravens, I am not going out of my way to take Lamar Jackson this year.
So here's the reasoning. And I agree with the Derrick Henry shout. That is clutch. Derrick Henry now as a Raven lessens the requirement for Lamar Jackson to do too much in the red zone, which is historically where he's been dinged up. This is still a player that has played 3 full seasons out of his first 6 years in the career. So a mobile quarterback, you expect them to get dinged up. But where you're most likely to get dinged up as a mobile quarterback is in the red zone. So Derrick Henry definitely alleviates that a little bit for Lamar Jackson. We might be thinking, well, he might stay healthier for longer. How's that a bad thing? Let's look at the correlation between scoring touchdowns and performance and in fantasy football. I've talked about this in other places. The most correlated position between touchdowns and fantasy points per game, we'll just say, is quarterback. So if quarterbacks require touchdowns for their fantasy production, and yes, Lamar Jackson is a mobile quarterback. He's going to add those numbers from a fantasy setting with his mobility and his ability to escape and rack up yards on the ground. That said, touchdowns are still most important. The magic number to get to overall QB1 historically over the last 10 seasons is 40 to 42 total touchdowns. It matters not whether those come on the ground, whether they come through the air. Scoring touchdowns is most important for quarterbacks. You look at Lamar Jackson, he has not even approached 40 touchdowns since 2019 season. That was his first full season as a starter in the NFL. He threw for 36 touchdowns on 401 pass attempts. Talk about unsustainable touchdown rate. And he also popped in 7 on the ground. So that was 43 touchdowns. He was the overall QB1 in 2019. You look at his stats since then. 2020, 26 touchdowns through the air, 7 on the ground. 2021, 16 through the air, 2 on the ground. 2022, 17 through the air, 3 on the ground. Last year, 24 through the air, 5 on the ground. So he has not been sniffing 40 touchdowns since 2019. And the team, oh, by the way, just added Derrick Henry. So all of that to say, I'm not just not drafting Lamar Jackson, but theoretically and digging through the stats and looking at what is required with the understanding like what is required to be the overall QB1, touchdowns 40 to 42, I can confidently say that like I believe Dak Prescott has a better chance to score 40 touchdowns this season than Lamar Jackson. So that's what went into that controversial take I had on Twitter. Dak Prescott, again, dropping into the 9th round sometimes. His ADP's in the 8th round. This is a guy that last season threw for 36 touchdowns. What did the team do this year? Their running back stable got significantly worse, going from Tony Pollard back to Zeke with Rico Dowdle. So talk about like, what do we expect from a team moving forward? That's how I was able to make that claim. I think Dak Prescott has a better chance of being overall QB1 than Lamar Jackson does this season. Argue with the wall. No, I'm just kidding. That is a controversial take. I will own that for sure. But that was the reasoning behind that. Papy's pieces here with the Titans. Hell yeah, let's go. That is an OWS user if I've ever seen one. This is a good shout and a good discussion to be had. Kyler, good value for upside too. What's your take on that? And then I'll give you mine.
So I like Kyler Murray a lot this year. I like the Cardinals offense a lot this year. And in particular, I like Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride. Those are 2 huge targets for me. I have very high percentage. I think I have 31% Marvin Harrison in the big board drafts where I was getting him around pick 20. I think now he's up to about pick 13 in Best Ball Mania, but I still draft him, every chance that I can over there. I think that's fine ADP for him too. And then Trey McBride being the other one who, again, his ADP in the big board drafts, I think was around 50. And now I think it's creeping up into the lower 40 range. I'll still draft him there. And so by virtue of liking those 2 players, obviously I kind of have to like Kyler Murray. And it's really about, liking Kyler Murray as a fantasy player, because liking him as a real life player, I'm not like super sold that he's a good real life football player. In fact, I would probably say like, I don't necessarily think he is a good real life football player, but from a fantasy standpoint, he certainly is a big time threat with his legs. Obviously he's going to be up there in the upper echelon of being a threat with his legs. He's a gunslinger, right? He likes to get the ball downfield. And he's also the type of quarterback who I think will favor his primary weapons. So while some quarterbacks really spread the ball around a lot, others don't. And, if you think Jay Cutler was like the prime, he's just like, where's Brandon Marshall? I don't even see anybody else out here. Screw it. And he just fired 100 miles an hour to Brandon Marshall, no matter who was on him. I see a little bit of that in Kyler Murray. And so I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is, in my opinion, the best wide receiver prospect that's come along that I've seen ever. I think that people, to create a little bit of buzz to talk about, acted as if Malik Neighbors was in his league. And that is not to say that I think Malik Neighbors is a bad player. I don't. I think he's a fine player. But I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is just the best wide receiver prospect I've seen. I mean, just the height, the speed, the technical ability, the hands. Like, there's just nothing there that I don't see as elite. And so I think he's going to be – I think he could finish as a top 5 wide receiver this year. In fantasy scoring. I really believe that. And I think that boosts Kyler Murray a lot. And then the other guy is Trey McBride, who's really the secondary weapon on that team. Unless you think, Wilson or Dortch is really going to be, I see those guys as complementary pieces. I think, Trey Benson, who I like, but he'll probably this year end up kind of being in a slog with Connor if Connor stays healthy. So I think really the second weapon there to target is McBride. And McBride is just a guy, man. If you watch him play football, like he just looks like Gronkowski to me. Like he just looks like a guy who's just physically dominant guy out there. I mean, just throwing people like they're kids. I think he's just a football player. I think he's talented. I just think he's good. And so I see him as the second weapon on his team, right? So if I'm really looking for an elite tight end, I want them to be the first or second weapon on their team. And I think he is. And so I love Murray, McBride, Marv stacks. If I can get those three, I'm happy. So that's something I'm looking to put on my teams.
Talk about the Gronk factor for Trey McBride, dude. He scored 4 touchdowns last year. 2 of them were straight up like getting the ball 12 yards out and legit just carrying people into the end zone. It was insane.
He's one of those guys where you just see him and you're like, that is just a dude. I mean, he's just like,
that dude's a dude for sure.
He just throws people like they're not there type of physical specimen. And he's young. Again, he's going to be in a featured role. I think that, other than Kels, who could always be the tight end one, obviously, and people are, I think, drafting Laporta kind of at his ceiling right now. But McBride, to me, is the other guy who could be the tight end one overall this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, so let me support the claim here about touchdowns mattering. The touchdown leaders at the quarterback position, this is total touchdowns rushing and throwing. Josh Allen was first with 44 touchdowns. He was the quarterback one. So again, that 40 to 42 touchdown range is what we're looking for. Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts both combined for 38 touchdowns. That was your quarterback 2 and quarterback 3 last year. Okay. Jordan Love, 36 touchdowns last season. So the point here is we have to understand like what is most important to these various positions to be able to make these claims. Back to the Kyler Murray being a value discussion, I would argue that Kyler Murray at QB8 is much less valuable to us than Dak Prescott at QB9 or Jordan Love at QB10 or Brock Purdy at QB12. Brock Purdy scored 33 total touchdowns last season. That was 5th in the league. So I would argue that I am not a big fan of Kyler Murray at ADP currently. He's kind of in this nebulous range of QB within the tiers in that he is behind the elites, but his rushing upside is kind of keeping him above the like dart throwy type guys. To me, he's been a skip, man. When I'm in drafts, I'm looking at Dak there. I'm looking at Love there. I'm looking at Purdy there. I'm waiting on Jaden Daniels, who probably has a similar range of outcomes to Kyler Murray this season. I'm looking later at Will Levis. Again, touchdowns matter most for quarterbacks. Again, we're just dropping the controversy here, dude. I love it. Any rebuttal to that?
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with you in a vacuum. I think a lot of my Kyler Murray love comes from my McBride and Marv love, and that I want to stack him because I like I said before, I don't necessarily love him as a player. I just see that I think he's going to have a good fantasy year, I guess. And I will take Marv and McBride without Murray too, right? Like I have a lot of team. I mean, like I said, I have 31% Marv in big board drafts, and I think 25% McBride. I'm nowhere near that with Murray, right? Like I'm more probably around like 10 or 11% Murray. So basically just when I have those guys trying to stack him rather than going out of my way to get him. But I don't dislike him. I do think that he could have a very good fantasy year. But it's more of a, I want to put him in stacks than like, I just really want this guy.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to throw this back up again. If you missed it, sign up. If you're a new user, sign up at Drafters using code OWS, get you 100% first match deposit bonus up to $100. That is 5 free Drafters main Millies entries. So good morning. Welcome, dude. We are stoked to have you here. We've been talking a lot about variance in the early draft window. What are some other spots? And you nailed the fact, and I covered this earlier this week, you nailed the fact that the highest variance in this early draft window from a positional standpoint is at running back. We covered the Titans, the team. Throw me some pass catchers that you think have some high variance right now that you think could see some ADP movements over the next 4 months.
Yeah, I've got at least a couple of those guys. And I'm sure that people have said Jamison Williams. He, to me, is kind of obvious that he could move up. I mean, he's Detroit's wide receiver too, as far as I can tell. There's not really even a threat to that role for him. They didn't draft anybody, and he was, I think they traded up to get him at 11th overall, if memory serves me correct, a couple years ago. But certainly a high draft capital, pick, and I think he can play. I think in the first year, obviously he was hurt, and then the second year he had the gambling incident, and I think that they kind of made him earn his way back onto the team, sort of, and he did that throughout the second half of the year. But they never really put him into a like high volume. We're really going to use you the way you would use a 11th overall pick, and I think that that's kind of just because of the culture of the team and the way they kind of made him earn it. And towards the end of the year, he was starting to play more than Reynolds, snap wise, very end of the year. That didn't happen until the very end of the year. And so I think all the tea leaves are saying like, all right, like, he atoned for his gambling sins, and now he's going to be our guy in this wide receiver 2 role. And if you look at Detroit, like, yeah, it's Goff and his noodle arm. He's probably going to throw to Laporta and St. Rob Brown anyway, because those are more the guys he is comfortable targeting those areas than necessarily going down the field. But when they do go down the field, I mean, who's it going to be? It's going to be, Jamison. Like, there's no reason to think it's not going to be anybody else. And Detroit's offense is good. Like, this is a good offense, so it's a big pie. They play indoors, good chance of a week 17 dome indoor game. The division is not very threatening from a defensive standpoint, and there's a good chance that people will favor Laporta and the Sun God in terms of the defenses who they're going to try to take away first, which means he might get a lot of favorable coverages to try to run behind, especially early in the season. So I just see him as a guy that is drafted outside the top 100 picks. There's a lot of guys like, I think, Curtis Samuel going above him. I don't really understand that. Do you guys see the same Curtis Samuel that I see? Like, what is your upside in Curtis Samuel? Like, I know he's on the Bills and they don't have a lot of other players, but like, what do you think he's going to do this year that makes him like the 60th pick or whatever people are taking freaking Curtis Samuel? So, I just think that he's obviously a player that if he get Jameson Williams, obviously a player that like if he gets some camp hype, if it's like, oh man, he's fast, he's getting behind the safeties in camp, like he's gonna move on. So I think he's a good example. There's of course I'm gonna have to say this. I'm probably eat my words like I always do. Christian Watson, like I'm not gonna quit the Christian Watson train. I guess I'm just never gonna stop with the Christian Watson train. Like he'll be out of the league, and I'll be like, can I draft Christian Watson late? But I just think that if he stays healthy ever, which is a big if, that he is the wide receiver 1 there, and that he's really a wide receiver 1 in the league. And similarly, like where I see like Jaden Reed being taken almost feels similar to me, like Curtis Samuel. Like, I don't know. I know he was good last year, and like, I think he's a good player, but I just think if Watson is healthy, he's the one to own in that offense. And again, then there's Dobbs, like Musgrave could be back healthy. They brought in Josh Jacobs. Like, there's just a lot of other places the ball could go this year in my mind. That I think Reed kind of had a perfect storm last year of him being the guy. I don't see him being the guy this year if people are healthy. So I think drafting him at like 50 to me is kind of like you're drafting a second-year slot receiver at 50. I'd much rather just roll the dice on Watson staying healthy and take him at 90. So, that's another one. And again, if it comes out, like if Watson has a good preseason and they're like, oh, his hamstring injuries like are fixed because he went to the specialist and they went like this, and now his hamstring, like, he's gonna move way up too. So I think those are 2 good examples of guys like that.
I like those shouts. To close the loop on the Jameson Williams discussion, he did not play over 68% of the offensive snaps in any game until the playoffs.
Yeah.
He only once outsnapped Josh Reynolds last season, and it was in week 15, 45 snaps to 38 snaps. So you look at what is different now. Josh Reynolds is obviously no longer in town, and their depth chart behind Amon-Ra St. Brown at wide receiver is JMO, and then you're down to Khalif Raymonds. You're down to guys that were like, okay, why are they still on an NFL team?
Right.
Khalif, if you're watching this, dude, mad respect. You're doing great. I did not mean to throw any shade there. But yeah, those are good shouts. Christian Watson has been a difficult click for me, but I might be reassessing that because I am Mr. Embrace the Variance. I think I need to get some here in the early draft window. So those are dope shouts. Yes, we have shouted this. If you've been listening to the Best Ball Plus product, we have been shouting Jalen Tolbert over in Dallas, ascending the depth chart in Dallas, entering his third season, right? Is that right? Fact check me on that.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Third.
Second or third, I can't remember. Second season. And should be getting the snaps on an offense that we already talked about, could be passing a lot more there in Dallas. So I love that shout. I have, he is a fun click in the 18th for me. You mentioned before we got on, and we'll end with this. We're at 40 minutes. I wanted to keep it between 45 and an hour. We'll see how long this takes. I don't know. You mentioned an exercise that you do, which is like Jeopardy trivia style,
sort of,
where you're basically going through, and this is an exercise that you have adapted as you have continued your best ball journey, where you're just going through reading off like, hey, who's the wide receiver 3 in Detroit? I'm just say that because we just talked.
That's on my list, by the way. It was the wide receiver 3.
That's hilarious. So we're going to end this with a segment that we're going to just go through and do this exercise. You don't need to do it with a buddy. Just write something down and then see if you can name off these players. This is a good exercise to do to try and figure out these depth charts and try and find some guys that might have more opportunity than we are thinking about now. So I'm going to throw it over to you. We're going to go through. You're going to quiz me, and we'll see how I do with this Jeopardy style quiz.
Yeah, quick rundown of what exactly I'm going to do. That was really it. Was I decided to go through every team's depth chart and just write down, because I'm old and still like to use a paper and pencil, but you could do a spreadsheet if you want to type. Every team's fantasy relevant players. So just their QB, RB 1 through 3 for some teams, only 2, wide receiver 1 through 4, some teams only 3, and, tight end 1 or 2. And I thought to myself, why am I doing this? I live and breathe this stuff. I know this stuff. I'm just going to write down something that's already in my brain. But I thought, it's a good exercise. Let's do it. And what I found when I did it was that I absolutely had blind spots as to players where I just didn't necessarily think, they were here, or they have this opportunity, or they're, like the Detroit wide receiver 3, who is it, right? And People Jones is even the wide receiver 4, right? If you want to go another one, like just things like that. It's like, who was this person and where are they now? And even me, who, spends a lot of time on this, I had blind spots. And so I think that it might sound silly. You might think, everybody on every roster, every fantasy relevant player, but you might be surprised if you take that minute to just go through and write down every single person that's fantasy relevant on their team, that you have some blind spots. And so that's what made me do this. And so some of them here we'll go through, we'll see. I know you got every depth chart up on a tab right now, right? But
I do not. We'll see how we do.
The Steelers RB3.
Oh, fuck you, dude.
See what I mean? Blind spots. You think you know them? I thought I knew them all.
I don't even know.
Cordell Patterson, right? And
come on, that's cheating.
And why is that important, right?
He's the kick returner 1.
Wait, but Arthur Smith is there, man. Arthur Smith loves him some Cordell Patterson. Like, if you don't think Cordell Patterson's going to get like 20% of the snaps and eat into, Najee and Warren's production, I promise you, week 1, when Cordell Patterson gets 30% of the snaps and scores a short touchdown, you will hate not having remembered that he's the Steelers RB3.
Oh my God. Let's go, dude. This is great. All right.
Yeah. Bengals tight end.
Mike Gesicki.
Mike Gesicki, right? So that was something for me. I was like, oh yeah, I kind of didn't really think that he was there, but opportunity, right? The Colts RB2.
Evan Holbrook.
Is it, or is it Trey Sermon?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I want to believe it's Evan Hull. I mean, Evan Hull had the opportunity before getting hurt last season. So that was my assumption, but I don't know.
Trey Sermon is the guy. If you look it up on ESPN, you will see. Remember him? You will see as the RB2 on the Colts depth chart, right? So who's drafting Trey Sermon? Well, if Jonathan Taylor gets hurt, who's going to get the opportunities, right?
I'm drafting Evan Hull, to be honest.
I mean, and it might be Evan Hull, right? But I didn't even realize Trey Sermon was there. You know what I mean? The Chargers wide receiver 4.
Semi Fehoko.
How about DJ Chark?
Oh yeah, that was a new one.
Good player, right? And again, a lot of variance in the Chargers wide receiver room right now. Like we think it's going to be Palmer, Quentin Johnson, and Lad McConkey, but that's a pretty unestablished group. And so who's to say DJ doesn't end up sneaking in there? By the same token, right? The Chargers tight end.
They brought in 2 this year. They kept one. Oh, I forget who they brought in, dude. God damn it.
Right. So Will Dissly.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, they brought in Dissly from
Will
Seattle.
Dissly. Now, is Will Dissly going to do anything? I don't know, but maybe.
Yeah.
To leave
there. Chark is one, dude.
There you go, man. He might end up being the one, right? The Raiders QB2.
The Raiders QB2?
Mm-hmm.
Aiden O'Connell.
Well, I think he's technically the QB1.
I don't know, dude. That's open for debate.
It might be open for debate, but I think he's technically the QB1. Minshew, right? That's where Minshew went.
He's the starter, dude.
Is
if you look at, well,
is he?
My assumption is if you look at betting markets, he's minus odds to be the starter to open the season.
Is he minus odds? I mean,
yeah.
I figure it's a competition, but like I didn't.
It is, yeah.
I didn't think in my head that like Minshew was there. Like I was like, who the hell?
Dude, let the mania just let it loose, dude.
Like they didn't draft anyone. I totally thought they were going to draft somebody. So like, who's their QB? Like, oh well, maybe it'll be Minshew. I don't know. The Bucks wide receiver 3,
Jalen McMillan,
maybe, or Trey Palmer.
Yeah, or Trey Palmer. I think honestly they drafted McMillan just for that role. Because Palmer kind of had his shot over the last 2 seasons, but I don't know.
But I think McMillan more profiles as a slot type receiver. And I think they might kick Goodwin back in there and put Palmer on the outside.
That's what I think it depends on, because we already have the coach speak saying Chris Godwin is moving back to the slot. So yeah, I think that is what it depends on.
But another spot where it's like, all right, who's going to do this? How about the Redskins tight end?
They drafted Sinnott and they have Zach Ertz.
Yeah, there you go. There's both of them. I said Redskins. I still do.
No, I'm with you.
I didn't write it down. Redskins, Commanders. Sorry, I don't mean to be racist here. The Commanders tight end. Yeah, they have the rookie and then Ertz, who was another guy where I was like, okay. The Giants running back 2.
This is up for debate. It's either Tyrone, whatever the hell, the rookie. Running back or Gray.
Right? Gray. Like, Gray. I'm like Gray is the
who's that?
Right? Like, okay. Guess I'll worry about Gray. And one more, who were the 2 running backs that the 49ers drafted? Well, one they drafted, one was an undrafted free agent.
I forgot their names. Garendo or something.
Garendo's one. Yeah, the guy out of Louisville who's a burner but can't really play football.
Yeah. And then I forgot the name of the UDFA.
Cody Schrader.
That's right.
Yeah, the Missouri, I think, is where he went. But
GM's in the chat. GMs.
Right. Another guy who, the 2 guys that went to the 49ers, right? They're both rookies. I don't know how happy they are with Mitchell as the backup. Who knows? But CMC, doesn't always play full seasons, and that's obviously a lucrative, rushing backfield to be in. So will one of them end up being the RB2 and having value? And obviously you can draft them both for nothing. So, just blind spots, in terms of going through, and I could have even listed more, but I don't want to go all day. But it's like, just blind spots here and there. And again, we're people who do this all the time, right? We're talking out here on a podcast. We do a lot of drafts. If you're not, somebody who's living and breathing this, you probably have even more, but even we have some. And I felt like just taking the, 30 minutes or an hour, however long it took me to sit there and write them down, did me some favors. And, like I said, I do a lot of drafts. I still wasn't perfect.
All right, I got one for you before we leave. That was fun, though, dude. Who's the wide receiver 1 in Buffalo?
You think it's Keon Coleman?
Dude.
I think it's Keon Coleman.
Shakir, bro.
I mean, it could be Khalil Shakir. And I like him. I like him more than Curtis Samuel, who I've already hated on. I think, Shakir,
I did that because you just shit on Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, I mean, I think Shakir will be like the wide receiver too, and he has some rapport with Allen. I do think they're going to try to use Keon Coleman as the wide receiver one, or I could have answered Dalton Kincaid. He might end up being the wide
That
receiver.
was a fun one, right?
Yeah.
All right, man. Dude, that was fun. Thanks for coming on. Again, this is the 1 week season Best Ball Plus Industry Experts series. These will be live on YouTube and Twitter every Friday. We are at the end of our free preview for this Best Ball Plus package. So if you're not a member, link in the description, get signed up, head on over to oneweekseason.com, get signed up for the Best Ball Plus package. We are bringing you 5 30 to 60-minute training sessions a week. That is 95 one-on-one coaching sessions. That's what that equals. So from when these contests opened at the end of April until the start of the NFL season in the second week of September, we are doing this 5 times a week. You're also going to get various written stuff. You're going to get the team previews where we go through all that depth stuff. You're going to get rankings for Underdog, DraftKings, Drafters. You're going to get all that stuff. So get signed up for the Best Ball Plus package. Link down in the description. If you're on Twitter, just head on over to oneweekseason.com. Click on the Best Ball Plus tab. Get signed up because we are doing this relentlessly. As always, Papy, dude, it was a blast chatting with you. Brought out some really, really good stuff. If you're looking to follow Papy, his Twitter handle is, or his X handle, whatever, is the same you see on the screen right there, right? Papy324?
Papy324.
Beautiful. So follow him. Those who are familiar with OWS know Papy, the beloved Papy. Until next time, y'all, I'm Hilow. You know where to find me. We'll see you.
1 week season.